And nowadays, James, as you know, and this is Professor James Taylor we're talking about. Nowadays, James, as you know, the truth is few and is fleeting when it comes to the news. But one thing I do want to say to this, in terms of this Senate trial, is that I remember last week, the last time he was on the show, you brought up a particular rapper. So I'm going to represent New York, and I'm going to bring some New York wisdom to this whole impeachment inquiry and trial. You know, Nas said something that I thought was very interesting, right? He said, I'm thinking of crime when I'm in a New York state of mind. And whenever you look at Trump, you need to think of crime, and you have to do something that dilated people talked about. Dilated people had open eyes and open mind, in an open mind. And another line from that famous New York state of mind, that rap says, I never sleep because sleeping is the cousin of death. Beyond the walls of intelligence, life is defined. So we're seeking the truth, James, in this whole issue, and we need to get people in a New York state of mind, a state of mind that sees Donald Trump for who he really is.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me back on Black Men Screaming, Maurice. Yeah, Donald Trump is best read through the lens of 1980s, 70s, and 90s New York politics, and that is everything from Abe Beame, to Ed Koch, all the way through to Dinkins,
John Lindsay,
and John Lindsay even before that. Yes, and what and the Black migration to New York, and which doesn't really get talked about in the context of people. I mean, they talk about Harlem specifically, but not New York, like Brooklyn and the Bronx. They get talked about sort of later, but as a part of the Black migration aspect of history is what I'm talking about on that point. But New Yorkers know Giuliani. They knew who Trump was 30 years ago, and much of the country did too. So none of this is as shocking as it might seem. I mean, the idea that Donald Trump is president to me is still shocking. And the way in which he and Giuliani and these other people around him are conducting themselves and getting away with it is, well, quite stunning. When I say getting away with it, I mean they haven't been convicted yet. Right now, Donald Trump is being impeached, and that's where we are now.
Are you sure about that?
Well, he's being held accountable.
Well, this is the reason I interrupt you, because I want to bring up the conversation about who actually is on trial at this particular point in time. Because when you go back and you look at all the information that's out there, and of course, trying to be fair, I want to know what the Republicans are thinking. So Ann Coulter wrote an article talking about impeachment. Do Republicans have more fun? And we're coming up. Actually, the day we're taping is the anniversary of the first time they actually the allegations actually came out. They came out in the Drudge Report pertaining to there might be, Bill Clinton being on trial. And all of these people are focusing back on all of this information. But I thought we didn't live in the past. I thought we lived in the future. We look at the past so that we don't create the same mistakes in the future. But the Republicans seem to be focusing on Bill Clinton. But my question is to you: is who's really on trial in the media right now? Is it Donald Trump or is it Bill Clinton? Because every time we turn around, that's the conversation always goes back to that particular situation.
This is a presidential campaign, and that's a campaign move. This is what they did in 2016. They kept talking about Bill Clinton in order to deflect Donald Trump's conduct when Stormy Daniels and Miss McDougal got brought forth. The way they offset that was mention Bill Clinton. If I'm immoral, so is Bill Clinton, Hillary's husband. And Hillary, the victim, is guilty by association with her husband, and that's how that worked. And so they just looped it, and that's what they're doing again. This whole 2020 campaign is 2016 all over again. The names and faces have changed, some of them, but the structure of 2016 in terms of the moves being made, they're not new. None of it. From Ukraine being Russia, the phone call being Russia, if you hear me, to many other areas of overlap. So Donald Trump is a very simple-minded man, and the people around him are simple-minded, and the thing that protects him is the office of the presidency and the way Americans respect it, and that's the thing that that he had, has an advantage of, is the office, not him. And I think a lot of these people who are being disloyal are loyal to the office and not to him, and think they're helping, but this is the way it's being played out.
And a lot of times, in the conversation, they will throw out, Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist page 65, which he stated, impeachable offenses are political in the sense that they are attack on the body politic. And then he talks also about the injuries done immediately to the society itself. So when you look at that particular analysis of the Federalist page 65 page and what they're talking about, do you think that lying to the American public, lying to branches of the government is attack on the body politic? Has that done injury to society, and not only to American society, but to all those people in, let's say, for example, the Ukraine, who were waiting on that particular funding or whatever to be able to fight against the war that they were fighting against Russia?
Yeah, or the Kurds, right? Who were loyal, and they gave them up to Turkey. Donald Trump is, everything. I think the Constitution placed safeguards. The framers placed safeguards in place to protect against, and yet, the system is working because he's not winning, except that Mitch McConnell is allowing the Senate's power to be on the side of Trump instead of on the side of the House, which is what Congress is supposed to be.
Yeah, well, I mean,
even if they disagree, they're not supposed to be on the side of the president. And what we have is one branch has actually lent its power, the Senate, to the presidency. So even though Donald Trump is personally a weak president, Mitch McConnell is making his presidency stronger than it ever was because of the way he's playing his hand in these impeachment processes. And so lying, Bill Clinton got impeached for lying. Nixon, did lying and more. Johnson broke the law. Trump has done more than all of them. Johnson fired the Secretary of War when he wasn't supposed to. Donald Trump
Tenure Act, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Donald Trump has done everything that the Constitution says a president should be impeached for.
But one of the things that I think is interesting, because when people read Federalist page 65, and you can look it up on YouTube or whatever, but it was a section that I thought was very interesting, and I want to emphasize this particular section so that the Republicans and the senators both on both sides actually hear it. And this is the hope that Alexander Hamilton had in the Senate. He said, where else in the Senate could have been found a tribunal sufficiently dignified and sufficiently independent? What other body would likely be free, confidence enough in its own situation to preserve, unawed and uninfluenced, the necessary impartiality between the individual accused and the representatives of the people, his accusers?
Yeah, they're quoting Alexander Hamilton too, and that's part of the way the law and the arguments of those times were made. They were open to both sides interpreting it, and so Republicans are also trying to justify a lot of the stonewalling we see.
It's 12 o'clock
because they emphasize the political component that Alexander Hamilton says, unfortunately, will be a part of the impeachment process. But I think the impeachment process is less political and more constitutional. But because Mitch McConnell is behaving politically and not constitutionally, what we're seeing is so dangerous, because I know the history of the presidency and of Congress and its tug of war going back and forth. And what Mitch McConnell is doing is making the presidency as powerful as the presidency would be if another branch of government was on its side completely in terms of carrying out its agenda. Congress is supposed to be a watchdog, a police on the presidency. That's the nature of the relationship, is a policing relationship. The presidency is subordinate to Congress. Everyone runs around here saying they are co-equal branches of government. Where is that in the Constitution? Nowhere in the Constitution does it say they are co-equal branches of government. That's an interpretation of it. They are separate branches of government that engage in the same exact policy questions and issues of the day, from war to recognizing foreign dignitaries to to domestic policy, where they both have influence. The president and Congress have shared powers, not separate powers. Shared powers. Separate powers means they got power over here, they got power over here. They engage in power in the same areas. And Congress right now just passed the War Powers Resolution to pull the president back for killing the general of Iran without congressional authority or notice. And because war power is not even the president's power. That's, in fact, the president doesn't really share the war power with Congress in the document. His power, as we said last time, has evolved with time, with technology like TV and the atom bomb technology, and the right of the president, with the nuclear codes, to end it all for any, to use nuclear power. And that's what increased the power of the presidency. But Mitch McConnell supporting Donald Trump as he is in the impeachment it's all, Mitch McConnell's putting all the chips on the table. And I think next November, the Republicans are going to just be just devastated by the electoral pushback. And I say that because of the momentum of the electorate for the past 3 years has been all Democratic, all blue. It's been one long blue wave. And the Democrats have won in places they weren't supposed to win. They've won in places they were supposed to win. They've gained. They've set records with women, records of non-whites, a record number of women mayors around the country. You have Democrats in the South now, in Kentucky and in Alabama. And what it all means is we're talking about party politics, not about what it means for black folk and other communities yet. We're just talking about the elections and the strategies and the politics of the 2020 election and impeachment and how that all plays out. And my point is, Mitch McConnell is underestimating the extent to which people are going to judge the Republicans at the ballot box in November, no matter what happens with Donald Trump. That's going to be a separate hearing. Whatever they do to Trump, so Nancy Pelosi, I think, has skillfully put the Republicans in a bad position, because now they're already saying no before the trial has started, and she's held the impeachment articles long enough to just let that just sit there on everybody's table. Even, the people in the Midwest and the conservative communities, the Christian communities, so-called, the evangelicals, they're sitting back seeing what's going on, and they at some point got to look in the mirror themselves. Now, it may not get them to vote for the Democrats, but it may make the Republicans seem that much more odious and undesirable, and it actually suppress the Republican vote that has not been strong since the night Donald Trump lost anyway. So I think Nancy Pelosi has brilliantly mobilized a multi-fronted or multi-pronged strategy that, one, is about Donald Trump's actual behavior that's being held into account for the record and for history, and like she says, forever. And that means he is an unacceptable president. He can never be a great president, ever. You can't be great and impeached. You're done.